Welcome back to another episode of Boom or Bust, your home for NFL Draft Talk. I'm your host, Terry, and today we're talking about defensive tackles. Getting a little close to the combine. I say usually marks about halfway through the process for me, so we are getting there. Definitely almost done with round one of evaluation, so pretty excited, man. It's a lot of work, but excited to see everybody kind of confirm their numbers and then go through for the second round evaluation. And usually this is about the time when more people have more tape. So a lot of the people that I missed and wasn't able to get it first time, I'll be able to pick them up. So going into defensive tackle, very similar to defensive end as far as the gradable traits. We're looking at the get off, the closing speed, the hand technique, the motor, same gradable traits. A little bit more focused on ability to take on double teams, something defensive ends usually don't have to deal with, and their ability to hold stout at the point of attack. So the POA, whatever we say, so somebody's ability to hold their ground basically at the line and not get moved off the spot by linemen. So let's just get right into it. So first up, got Rasheem Greene from USC. Rasheem Greene, 6'4", 275. And I think a lot of people, some people project him as the defensive end. And if you kind of just watch, again, with these defenses this year, the fronts were kind of all over the place. But I think more times than not, he was playing defensive tackle. And again, so I talked about grading people where they are. And so it is a little difficult this year. So that's why I said next year I'll probably be changing the way I label people. But Rasheem, I just see him as a 3 technique at the next level. He just, even though he's got the same measurables as like a Chubb or Sam Hubbard or whatever, he doesn't have that ability to play on the edge, which I kind of talked a lot about last episode with some of the DNs. He just doesn't have a bend to play. But when he's inside, I think he's pretty good because he's a very good athlete, real top level athlete. The issue with Greene for me is that he doesn't have the strength. At the point of attack, he's not stout. He's getting moved off the ball too much. He doesn't take on double teams well. And so that's a definite issue that is going to keep you off the field if you can't even hold your gap. It's one thing not to get off blocks, but it's another thing to get moved backwards. So that's something that he's definitely got to work on, is his strength and his ability to anchor on in the middle of the line. And then he's got real long arms. He's got potential to stack and shed to get off those blocks. I think his technique is just not there right now. But again, he's got real long arms, 6'4". So I think he's got some of the tools to help him get there. He just needs some more coaching. But more importantly, this guy's got speed. I gave him a level 4 get off, level 4 closing speed, which is pretty fast for a defensive tackle. His technique needs to improve. His motor definitely needs to improve. He kind of gives up on plays pretty quick. So I think someone that you might want to take a gamble on a little bit in the later rounds, but has some pretty good potential. Then we go down to Payne from Alabama. I really like Payne. The theme of this year is kind of athleticism for size, and a lot of these guys are athletic, including Payne. They use him as a fullback or whatever on the goal line, on offense, throw the ball to him a little bit. And you can see why. He can move. He caught the interception this year, and it's not like he, caused the interception, but still, it's just kind of one of those big guys that's, athletic for his size. And, he's really stout at the point. Love that about him. Like one of those immovable objects at the nose. That's what you want to see. Great, technique against the double team. And, he's got really good movement skills. I think even though he's not a straight up pass rusher, he has a really good get off for a 300-pounder. And, if you start getting him in the odd front where you're playing games and stunts and blitzes, I think he'll actually surprise people on how well he'll do once his spot opens up, how fast he'll be able to get there and make a play. So someone that I'm really excited about. Definitely think one of the top prospects at the interior. So you got a guy that is built like a nose, but athletic enough where you can move him around a little bit. So I think he's going to be one of the first round players. Then we go to Vito Vega, the number one consensus, probably number one defensive player for a lot of people. So there's a lot of talk about him. So what's the talk? He's 6'5", 340. We'll see what he measures out at, but that's what he's listed. So he's got elite size, but he wasn't just a nose. He played nose and he played defensive end and the eye front. And the reason he did is because he's really athletic for his size as well. He's elite at the point of attack. You can't move, like, if he's standing up, if he's doing bad technique, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can't move him. And so when he's on his spot and playing with good technique, it's impossible. And the other thing about that is that he didn't play with great pad level. He's 6'5" and he stood up a lot. And so if you get him playing with some leverage, it's even scarier to think about what he'll be able to do. So even though, he has all this natural power, he didn't really play with leverage, he didn't really have good technique against double teams, he still produced, he was still impossible to move, and he still wrecked run plays. And the reason is he can really stack and shed, so he's a little different with the way he stack and shed. And the way you typically want to stack and shed, you engage the blocker with your hands and you extend out so you can keep them away from you, and then you make a move to rip or swim off the block and then do what you got to do. The way he did it is that he got really close to blockers, almost chest to chest, which it kind of takes away their ability to extend on you, which is good, but it also makes it easier for them to hold on to you without people seeing that they're holding you. And so that's why you never really want to chest bump. But the thing with Vita Vea is that he's so strong that when he chest bumps people, he's kind of the one holding you, and then he's so strong he can just throw you out the way when it's time for him to make a play. And so he's 6'5". His arms aren't super long, but they're long enough. I think that with that amount of strength and with some better technique, he's going to be amazing at stacking and shedding. Even though he can ragdoll offensive players right now, I think he's got even more coming. But either way, when he wants to get off a block, he can get off a block. And then as far as a pass rusher, this is where I'm different. I thought when they did stunts and blitzes, he's pretty good because he can move. But as a straight up pass rusher, I don't see him as that great. He was pretty average to me. He flashed ability to kind of give you a quick move and get off blocks, but most of the time he kind of just want to sit there and take up space. So if it's a blitz or something, he'll get in the backfield, but a lot of times he doesn't even pass rush that hard. So, but as a run wrecker and kind of the potential of what he could be, I see it. Vita Vea's power is absolutely amazing to watch and it stands out because he's not playing with the best technique. So you can even get a more idea of how powerful he is to produce that way without even playing with proper technique. So gave him a level 4 hand technique though. He can definitely, when he wants to, he can be violent with his hands and he can get off people. And everything else, 3.5 motor, 3.5 closing speed, and 3.5 get off, which is pretty good athletic numbers for somebody that size. Then we got Maurice Hurst from Michigan, another 3-tech, penetrating 3-tech, super athletic, a lot of athletes this year. Now he's slightly undersized, I think, for some people. 280 and 6'2", that might be a little too short, a little too lack of length for some people to play in that 3-tech position full time, but I think he can do it. While he's very athletic and explosive, I think he's still stout. He's got a lot of strength to him. He holds his ground against blockers, even though he can get covered up by blockers because the lack of length, he doesn't keep them off of them. And I don't like his technique against the double team. He kind of tries to run around double teams instead of taking them on and splitting them. But even still, I do think, that he's strong enough to handle those blockers at the next level. And then he plays with great pad level. I mean, he's already 6'2", but he plays low, he stays low. And the difference with him is that I didn't see him stack and shed at all. What I saw him do is kind of dip under blocks. He kind of runs under blocks, or whenever he's stacked up with somebody, instead of shedding the block, he kind of just dips his shoulder under it. If you watch him, you'll definitely see it. It's almost like a linebacker where you'll see them try to block a linebacker in space, and they kind of dip under the block and run around and go make a play. That's kind of how he plays on the line, which is interesting. It's impressive that he can do it on the line, but you still want to see him be able to stack and shed these linemen. So it'll be interesting how people evaluate that. And then as a pass rusher, he's super explosive. I gave him a 4.5 get off, 4.5 closing speed. That's almost, a 5. That's almost elite level for the position. I think he does have rare speed for the position. I'm interested to see what his combine numbers come out, because on the field, he's moving like a linebacker almost. And so as a pass rusher, he's usually devastatingly too fast for guards and centers. And definitely when they do stunts, he's able to get home. So I like a lot of his upside. His motor runs hot too. I just want to see him better with his hands. And we want to see if that lack of length is really going to take him down at the next level. Then we got Tim Settle, and I'm going to be a broken record. Athletic for their size. So Tim Settle is 6'3", 335, built a lot like Vito Vega. But the man can move. The man can move just like Vito Vega can. But the thing with Tim Settle that I love, and I got to go back and watch him again too, because he didn't have any tape up the first time, but I did see some highlights of his. The man can move, but he has great hand technique. He knows how to pass rush like a defensive end. He knows how to hit the quick swim. He knows how to rip under and lean towards the quarterback. He knows how to pass rush. He knows how to stack and shed. I love his technique, and he's a big boy, but he can move. And so he's not just a space eater that's going to sit there at the nose. I think if you got an even front where you effectively move guys from nose to 3 technique, and you just let them play both, I think he's going to be a big value, because he's quick enough where he doesn't have to just sit there on a block. He can get off a block and penetrate, and I'm really impressed with him. So I'm excited to see more tape to see how consistent he is and all those different traits. But what I saw quickly, I was really impressed by. I definitely think he's a first rounder. Then we got Taven Bryan from Florida. Pretty decent size. Some people talk about him as a DN. I definitely think he's a penetrating 3 tech. He's 6'4", but he's not super long, so I don't know that he can live on the edge, but he's super athletic. He's, I would say, just as athletic, if a little less athletic than Maurice Hurst from Michigan. So the difference is Bryant is very raw. He's, kind of new to that position and hasn't been playing it for that long. So his technique is really raw and his IQ is really low for football. So I think whoever gets him has a project of getting him to be more consistent with his hand technique, getting him to be more aware on the football field and understand what the situation is so he can make plays, because yeah, it's just mental lapses that he had. You can clearly see that he didn't really know what was going on. And then against double teams, he tried to fight both blockers, which you never want to do. He can hold his ground. He's strong enough, but you just want to see better technique. He stands up a lot. We want to get his pad level lower. And as a pass rusher, again, explosive for these blitzes and stunts. Got some quick moves, but it's not consistent enough. So I gave him a 4.5 get off, 4 closing speed. Reminds me kind of Jonathan Bullard at Florida when he was able to get off the ball that fast. But we got to put that whole package together. So I think Brian's a little more of a project. I heard people saying next JJ Watt and all. No, like I don't understand what some of these people get this stuff from, especially these comparisons. Not at all. JJ Watt was a refined machine. This guy is far from it. So I do think he might be a first rounder, late first rounder, but he's definitely got an upside, but he's got a lot of work to do. Then you got Harrison Phillips from Stanford, and Harrison Phillips is a nose tackle in the odd front, 6'4", 295, and this is more your prototypical nose tackle right here, the one that you usually see kind of taking up space and holding down the double teams in the odd front. So he's not super athletic or anything. I think especially in this draft where you got a lot of guys that show kind of supreme athleticism for this position, he's not one of those guys that's going to give you that. But what he will give you is a lot of stoutness at that point where he can hold those double teams. I think he works pretty well to split the double teams. Now, he did have moments against certain high-powered teams where he was moved off his spot. And so that, I mean, it's not concerning because for me, it wasn't super consistent. It was just certain times he got moved off his spot. So you want to kind of look into that and just continue to build that strength. But, yeah, I just really, I still think he's pretty stout for that position. And then he understands how to stack and shed. He knows how to get off of those blocks. And I think he really does have a good motor. He works to try to get to the ball and he wants to make plays rather than eat space. So that kind of helps too. But as a pass rusher, he usually plays a lot of bully ball, what I call it, just kind of running into people. He's shown the ability to do some quick moves, but it's not always consistent. So I gave him a level 3 get off and level 3 closing speed. Like I said, a pretty average athlete for that position. And then as far as his hand technique, I gave him a 3.5. So Harrison Phillips, I definitely think is going to be like a late second, third rounder. But I think he'll be a solid player. He's definitely a leader and a guy that you want in the locker room. But as far as his skills on the field, I think he'll be a little bit of a later round, a rotational guy. All right, so those are all the guys that I was able to get to as far as tape-wise. There's a handful of guys that are still on my list but wasn't able to find any tape. And that's just kind of how it goes, especially with this position. But I would say, even looking at the North Carolina State guys, like their whole D-line is coming out. So the two guys in the middle, B.J. Hill and Justin Jones, are intriguing. Justin Jones, again, really fast for the position, really fast for his size too, for his weight, but short. And then B.J. Hill, non-athletic, but kind of a space eater. So those two could be interesting too. And then we got a couple other guys, but hopefully round 2 we'll be able to hit them. Okay. So I forgot to bring up the, I'll get to that in a second. Hold on. So defensive tackle though, as far as this group, so far, this class, I would say is one of the better classes that we've seen in a long time. When you look at the top guys, you got at least 5 first rounders potentially. So it doesn't usually happen that way, where you look at your top 5 defensive tackles, not all of them are usually first rounders. But when you talk about Vito Vega, Payne, and Hurst, those guys are almost locks to be first rounders. The thing with Hurst, again, is if his numbers come out right, it'll be fine. But if his numbers are slow, and then they look at his height, I think, and his weight, I think that might change some minds. But then Taven Bryant, again, I think people might hesitate because of his lack of skill. But I still think he'll be a first rounder. But, between Tim Settle, Payne, and Vita Vea, I think those are locks. So we don't usually have that. We didn't have defensive tackles, usually the DNs or the pass rushers. So really exciting group, a lot of dynamic players. As you heard me say, a lot of athletic guys for their size, and that's probably going to intrigue a lot of people. I think this is going to be one of the better interior classes that we had. So excited to see what happens there. Okay, and I forgot to mention, we got a real grade real quick. We're going to do the New York Giants class of 2015. And Yeah, so we're basically going to take a look at the class of 2015, give them a grade of how the class turned out, and then we'll be moving on. So if you pull up the class of 2015, you'll see their number one pick was Ereck Flowers out of Miami. And you know what? I randomly picked this team, so it's funny that it's the Giants because I was just talking about Flowers yesterday with one of my friends that I do draft stuff with. And while Ereck Flowers, of course, has become infamous now, I really loved him coming out of Miami, and I think he had a nastiness and he had a pretty good feet for his size. Miami plays a really zone heavy type offense, so he was asked to move a lot in his blocking scheme, and I thought he did pretty well. And I liked him. I thought right tackle was a possibility, but I also thought that he could end up being a left tackle. A lot of people, didn't agree with that. And so when he actually started at left tackle, it felt kind of good to have to hit that. But the reason we were talking about Ereck Flowers is because I tell people that, for all the stuff we do, we don't know these players. And for all the skills you can have, for all the boxes you could check and all those different things, we don't, at the end of the day, these are humans. And so their ability to work, their ability or their willingness to get better, their willingness to follow directions and assignments, we don't know those things. And that's what makes the draft so crucial for the NFL people, because they get to meet them and research these people. And so while I could watch tape and say, yes, Ereck Flowers can do it, once he gets there, I don't know how it's going to be in the locker room. I don't know how it's going to be in the weight room. I don't know how it's going to be in practice. And it's clear that he didn't really get into any better shape. He didn't really learn the playbook well enough, and he hasn't taken coaching well. And so a lot of people just be like, oh, no, he was like that before. It wasn't. He was a number 9 pick for a reason. So he's got that attitude. And from what we hear, he's not, a real coachable person. So anyway, you got Ereck Flowers, who up until last year was the starter, still with the team. We'll see what they do with him. You got Landon Collins in the second round, who is a bona fide star, I would say. I wouldn't say superstar, but he's a star, one of the top safeties in the league. You got Odigizua, I remember him from UCLA, who is no longer in the league. You got Michael Thompson, Texas, who is no longer in the league. You got Jeremy Davis, who is still in the league, but with a different team. And you got Bobby Hart, who just signed with a new team, but was with the Giants for 3 years. And he started in and out on a offensive line rotation. So we got 6 guys. Out of those 6 guys, we retained 3. So we retained half of them. The 3 that you retained, 2 were starters, 1's a star, and 1 was a rotational guy. And then the 3 that aren't with the team, 2 of them are no longer in the league. So we look at who's not in the league. Odigizua, who I'm surprised with. A lot of people liked him. A lot of people had talked about what he would be able to do. And I think he's bouncing around practice squads, but he wasn't with a team. So on the official roster, but he's a 3rd round pick. So a 3rd round pick is still premium. It hurts that he wasn't with the team or not in the league anymore. That hurts pretty bad. Michael Thompson, he is a 5th round pick that's no longer with the league. So that doesn't hurt as bad. And then you got a 6th round pick that's good enough to stick around the league. And then you got a 7th round pick that stayed with your team all 3 years, provided depth, started a little bit. And he's good enough to stay in the league too. So you got some big points here. Big points for low round picks that are still in the league and contribute. You got big points for Landon Collins becoming a star in the 2nd round. But then you could take away big points for Odigizua for leaving in the 3rd round. Then Ereck Flowers, I mean, yes, he hasn't produced well, but he produced enough to be a starter. And I still think if you put him on the right side, he'll be fine, or even at guard. So I like a lot. It's a smaller draft, so it's a decent hit rate for a smaller draft. While you would like to retain most of your guys, you retained half of them, and they all gave you something. So those are all big points, and then one became a star. Tricky grade, but I'm going to give it a B-. I'm going to give the 2015 Giants a B-. I think this draft definitely had some cornerstones, for better or worse, on the team going forward. Even though it wasn't that big of a draft, you would like to see that third round pick stick around and be a great player somewhere, or a good player somewhere, even if it's not with you. But I still think, the boost you get from Landon Collins and the boost from a 7th-round pick and Bobby Hart being a player for you is pretty decent. So yeah, I'm going to give that a B-. All right, so go to the comment section. Let me know what you guys think about defensive tackles. We got a really good class here. Which one's your favorite? What do you think they're going to go in the draft? Tell me what you think about the Giants draft. Whatever you want to talk about, go to the comment section. Let me know. Thumbs up, subscribe, share it around, and thank you for listening.